Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. And today is a Q&A episode, and I have 3 questions I'm going to dive into. But first, before I go into that, I just want to go over a few ways you can help support the podcast. So first, if you have found this podcast to be helpful in any way, if you could leave a rating and review, that will help more people find this podcast. I can get that information out and help more people. So again, appreciate that and appreciate everybody who listens. Next, I have my free masterclass on body recomp, what it is, how to do it, and the link to that is in the show notes. Second, I have my nutrition periodization masterclass, and with that, I go over each nutrition phase, what it is, how to do it, adjustments you need to make, common mistakes, and again, the link to that is in the show notes. Lastly, if you haven't yet, give me a follow on Instagram, Jeff, that underscore at the end of that as well too. That's where I'm most active on social media. If you have any questions, I'm just a DM away. If anything ever pops up on here that you need to have questions on, you can just reach out to me there with that. So with that out of the way, let's dive into today's question. So my first question I got was, is there such a thing as too many steps, like upwards of 4 to 5 hours a day? And so I think this is very individual, as are most things, right? I'm sure you've heard me say that many times with that. So I do think there's too many, or I do think it's individual, but yes, I do think at some point you could do too many. So again, like I think the big thing here is figuring out, what are you trying to do your steps for, right? Is it health? Are you trying to do it to lose body fat? What are your goals here with this? Either way, I think that no matter what you can do, you can get to the point to where it's just too much, and you may start to see, I don't want to say detriments because that's too strong of a word. I don't think you'll see detriments, but you'll just see less return on your investment. Okay. With steps, I think we can think of it as tiers. We have like sub 6,000 per day. That's where it's like, hey, you have this huge return on investment potential by increasing up to 8 to 10K per day. Let's just 8 to 12K per day. It's going to help with your appetite regulation. You're going to expend more energy, and it's just going to improve your overall health if you can get more movement in. Then we get to that 8 to 12. That's the sweet spot, right? That's where it's like, hey, you're going to really max out on like energy expenditure. You're going to have better appetite regulation, etc. Then we get to that like next tier, and this next tier, it just depends on the person. And I'll talk about total daily energy expenditure later in one of these questions, but it also depends on your current energy balance, where you're at there with that. Are you in a deficit? Are you at maintenance? Because when you're deficit, you may, while you're starting, you'll get more movement in, you'll get to this point to where you may see some exercise energy compensation, where you actually would burn less calories than you think. So there's that. And then hunger could potentially increase as well too, once we get to this upwards of 12 to 15K plus. Again, it's going to depend on the person there for that. So I think that, but again, nothing detrimental is going to happen other than now that's more time you're spending doing this. And again, you may see less return on your investment from overall health perspective and from energy expenditure standpoint. But if you like to do that much and it fits in with your lifestyle and it doesn't impact training and things like that, then I think that you can get as many as you want there with that, right? Again, I would say it's too many steps. If one, you're missing out on other important things in your life, AKA you just have too much time committed to steps than you'd want. So if it's like, oh, I got to get 25,000 steps because then I'm going to burn more energy and I have to get this every single day. But now you're missing out on things that you enjoy doing. It becomes more of a chore. Okay, that's too much then at that point. Let's say the second reason would be you're not reaching your desired goal. So for example, you're maintaining or gaining the weight, like either maintaining, losing, or gaining, but that's not what you want, right? Let's say you're trying to lose and you're maintaining, or it's going up, right? Let's say you're trying to gain some weight and you're just maintaining, right? That's where it's okay. You could probably decrease your movement. Let's say you are trying to maintain and you're seeing your weight trend down. That's where it's okay. Now you're probably moving a little bit too much and you have some wiggle room there with that. And when I say if you're not losing or you're trying to lose and you're gaining, I wouldn't say it's the steps fault, but you could just be trying to get so much movement in that now you're like hungry and it's harder for you to actually adhere to the calorie amount that you need to, right? So that's what I was saying there with that. And then 3, it's impacting your training performance. So it's like you're doing so much movement that now your legs are sore, your body is a little achy, or you just feel a little bit more fatigued because you're moving so much and now it's impacting training, then that's a negative, right? Just like with anything, really too much of something can lead to downsides. That's why I think the 8 to 12K per day is that sweet spot for most people. You're going to maximize energy expenditure. You're going to get the appetite regulation. It's going to be great for your overall health there with that, right? Again, if you're moving 12 to 15,000 steps and it's, oh, I need to move more to get to drop more weight, it's probably a nutrition thing that you need to focus on there. And again, if you're somebody who's trying to gain weight and you're having trouble doing it, and it's, I'm trying to stay lean and I need to get 20,000 steps per day, it's like you have some wiggle room there to drop your steps, right? As with anything, it's very context dependent and it depends on exactly what's going on with you. But again, some people love to get a ton of movement in, and that's just how it is. Again, with most clients, we're really trying to get to that 8 to 12K mark for most. And if they fall under that, okay, I'm going to push you to do a little bit more. And if we get more than that, I'm just like, I'm going to ask some questions of, are you doing this because this is like part of your lifestyle, you enjoy it, or do you really feel like you have to go out of your way there with that? And if it's, I just thought I needed to do more because, that's how fitness and nutrition is, like more is better, right? And then that's where we have this conversation of, hey, we could probably bump that down here a little bit. So hopefully that's helpful. So again, I think you can definitely overdo it, but it really just depends there with that. All right. Does it matter? I don't care if my calories come from carbs or fat besides 1 gram per pound of protein, or 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. I would say here with this, I wouldn't just brush this off completely and be like, I don't care about it. I don't want to focus on it at all. But what I do think is, what I have clients do, and I have found this method to be super helpful, and it really helps clients stick with their nutrition, is I have them track calories within a range, right? Usually anywhere from, depending on what phase of nutrition they're in, anywhere from 100 to 300 calorie range with that. And then I have them aim for a protein number. And then from there, I let carbs and fats fall where they do at that point. I found this to really give clients flexibility, because when you try to hit perfect macros across the board, it can be really challenging, and it can add a lot of stress that just to me is unnecessary. Unnecessary stress about, oh, I need to have this perfect meal that has 36.4 grams of carbohydrates, 12.4 grams of fat, and it has to have 17.5 grams of protein. That just becomes overwhelming, and it leads to people not wanting to stick to it. And what was the point of that? There was really no point in getting it nailed down. I think being within a range is more important. Think of it as having these guardrails up. And again, we tighten those guardrails or we expand them depending on what phase of nutrition they're in. And saying this though, why I don't think you should just completely neglect this and just be like, it doesn't matter, I'm not going to focus on carbs or fats whatsoever, is because, again, I think we can, one, get maybe a little too lax with it. And then also you may miss out on the benefits of carbohydrates. You may miss out on the benefits of fats if one are skewed too far to the other, right? So again, this is where we're looking at clients' biofeedback and seeing. So for example, I have a client, he is trying to gain weight right now, and we have him tracking protein, calories. He's obviously tracking carbs and fats. He's been complaining of higher hunger, right? Which is good. Obviously, hey, we need you to eat. This is a good thing. This is a little bit of a different kind of context here, but for him, his fats were pretty high, a little bit higher than I would like to see. And let me rephrase that. They weren't super high, but they were, based on his biofeedback of higher hunger, they were a little bit higher than I wanted them to be, right? And his carbs were still fairly high because he has to eat a pretty good amount of food here, but his fats were just pretty high. And you go through the food log, and now it looks like fats are just typically more calorie dense type foods. And so I told him, hey, we can try to get a little bit more carbohydrates and a little less fats. And that way it's like, now you're going to get, more food volume by doing this. So that's an example of where, yeah, it doesn't matter. So long as you hit protein and calories, you should be in a good spot. But within that, there's going to be some times where we do need to dial that in and change it, right? If this was a case where someone was really high fat, really low carbohydrate, and they're like, man, my training just isn't going well. I'm pretty lethargic. I'm having these cravings, et cetera. I'd be like, hey, maybe we bump up our carbohydrates a little bit more and replace some of those fats with that. So again, it really does depend. I think that you can take some of the stress off by just focusing on protein and calories, because that's really going to be the most important. But within that, we still want to have a decent setup of carbohydrates and fat. So don't completely neglect it, but you probably also don't have to stress over, oh crap, I was off by 5 grams of carbohydrates and 3 grams of fats over. It was just a terrible day. My nutrition adherence was terrible. No, that's freaking perfect. The body doesn't work perfectly like that. Hopefully that answers that question and gives you some insight in terms of what to do. But yeah, having clients track protein and calories, have them hit that, and let carbs and fats fall where they do has been super helpful. And then again, we just go through based on biofeedback and their results and see if we can tweak those, or if we need to, or maybe things are going well and it's like, we're good to go. So like for that client, I gave the example of the guy who his fats were a little higher and his carbohydrates were a little bit lower. If he was saying that he felt good, he was seeing great results, training was going, I'd be like, we can just keep rolling with that, right? But he's complaining of some hunger, so it's, hey, we might be able to adjust that a little bit there with that. Cool. All right. So last question of the day: is there such thing as fast and slow metabolisms? And 100%. But I want to dive into this there with that. So first, I want to go over, what do we consider metabolism? So metabolism is just essentially, I think when people say metabolism, they're talking about their total daily energy expenditure, right? How many calories you burn throughout the day. So real quick, I just want to briefly touch on total daily energy expenditure. So we have your basal metabolic rate, which is your BMR. That's just the calories that you burned through daily bodily functions, right? You could literally just be resting, and that's the amount of calories your body's going to expend throughout the day. And this is to keep you alive. Again, basic bodily functions like I talked about. And that's going to make up upwards of 70% of your total daily energy expenditure. I think a lot of times people think that it's just exercise activity. It's, oh, I exercise, I burn 500 calories. That's the amount of calories I burned in a day. But it's like your body expends way more calories than that. And exercise activity usually makes up a pretty small chunk of it, right? With that. So that's the first one. Second, we have thermic effective food, usually labeled TEF, and that's the energy your body expends absorbing and digesting food. So yes, the process of eating food, absorbing it, digesting it uses calories, right? That usually makes up about 10%. So pretty small amount. Then we have NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And you can think of this as spontaneous movement, me moving, talking, fidgeting, blinking, getting up and walking over to the bathroom to go to the bathroom, household chores. We can lump that into NEAT. Some people will say, oh, no, that can't be NEAT or that can't be NEAT. But just think of it as exercise that or movement that you're doing that isn't like planned exercise. So then it's like, does walking go in there? Again, it just depends on the definition, right? But again, just think more spontaneous movement throughout the day. Then we have exercise activity, right? This is your actual planned exercise. So this is, when you're lifting weights and you burn some calories. This is when you do your cardio. This is when you can lump your steps in there if you want it. It just ultimately depends on what your definition is. Just whatever it is, stick with it. I'm there with that. But this is planned exercise. So those are the four things that kind of make up your total daily energy expenditure. And the cool thing with this is that's the calories you burn throughout the day, right? And in saying this, there are some people who expend more and expend less based on genetics and some other things I'm going to go over. But within that, most people are going to fall into a general range here, right? So again, body size is going to play a role in this. So the shorter you are, the smaller you are. Yes, you are in most cases going to, if we were to graph this, you would probably fall on the lower end of your maintenance calories if or your total daily energy expenditure, which that is one thing that can impact it is your current energy balance. So if you're trying to aim for a calorie deficit, that could lower your total daily energy expenditure down slightly. But I'll go into that here in a little bit. So within saying this, I would say most people probably fall within 1,500 to 3,000 calories. Now, I know that's a pretty big range, but most people are going to fall in there. You're going to have some outliers that are going to be above 3,000. You're going to have some outliers that are going to be under 1,500, right? But most people are going to fall within this range. There was a graph from Panzer et al. In 2021, and it showed total daily energy expenditure total energy expenditure daily for people. And it's pretty interesting here. Like they have someone here who is about 70 kilograms male that their total daily energy expenditure was 7,000 calories, right? Now, this is an outlier. Like you see this graph and there's so much lumped in here to this, like I said, 1,200 to 3,500, right? But even within that, there's even more of a cluster there between like on average, I would say the median, like 22, 23, 2,400. It's like where most people are going to end up falling, again, give or take a little bit there. So that person's around 70 kg. Then you also have a 70 pound kg female who this is at the low end of it, was their total daily energy expenditure is like 1,200 calories, right? So you can see how there's this discrepancy within it. But again, these are more of the outliers. Again, most people are going to fall within this range. There with that. So there 100% is fast and slow metabolisms. There's no doubt. I just think I'm always cautious on this because I think people are so quick to blame, oh, I have a slow metabolism, and they don't realize that there's some things that they're doing that they can work on there with that. So first, let's talk about things that can impact your total daily energy expenditure. So first, your calorie balance. If you're someone who's been dropping weight, you can expect your total daily energy expenditure to probably drop down a little bit more. Now, there's going to be some people that it will drop down even more. There's some people where it won't drop down much. And those are the people that are going to be a little bit luckier with that, right? They're going to have less friction in the weight loss process. But some people adapt. They really adapt to an energy deficit. So it's like your body weight starts to trend down and their body is going to compensate for that pretty hard. Again, now you can see where each person's going to have different total daily energy expenditure. And then within that, even if you're aiming for a calorie deficit, you may compensate within that. On the flip side, you find that some people have this large range of maintenance calories, right? Then you also find that some people so for them, it's like, it's easy to maintain weight, but to alter their body weight, it's very challenging. But then you also have people where when they get into a calorie surplus, their body adapts to that and they start to expend more energy. So for these people, it's very hard for them to gain weight. But then you have some people who compensate less and it's very easy for them to gain weight. Again, most people are going to think that they're like, oh, that's me. I'm this person that's going to, it's so hard for me to lose weight. It's so hard. And my body just puts on fat super easy. Again, most people are going to think they're the kind of special snowflake. And most of the time it's what they're doing. So if you're hearing this, you may be someone that you fall where you think you do, right? But it's not as extreme as you think, right? Because again, most people are going to fall within that range there that I was talking about. For some people, it's just there could be a little bit more friction there with that. Genetics, right? So again, genetics is going to play a role. Someone could just naturally they may expend more energy throughout the day. Some people may just be a little bit lower, right? We go back to that chart that I was talking about. Some people may fall in the lower end, some people may fall in the higher end there with that. Muscle mass is going to play a role, right? Again, and so this goes back to some of the things you're doing. If you're someone who's dieted in the past, you don't really weight train, you're not focused on adding muscle, you probably are going to have a little bit of a lower total daily energy expenditure. Again, is it going to be thousands of calories? No, but all these things start to stack up, right? Medications, if you're on certain medications, can cause you to have a lower or higher daily energy expenditure, right? So again, we want to look into those. Your dieting history, right? And this kind of goes into muscle mass and your current body composition, but your dieting history is going to play a big role here. If you're someone who's always been like this dieter, crash dieter with really high levels of energy expenditure, you probably have lower amounts of muscle mass. And on top of it, your body just was probably adapted to that over time. Now, this doesn't mean that it's always going to be that way, but if you're unaware of these things that you're doing to your body, this is where you could run into, I try to lose weight and nothing happens with that. And again, it probably comes back to things that you've been doing in the past. Your sleep, that's going to be a big one, right? It's not going to be this massive increase in your total daily energy expenditure, but I also think that when we get good sleep, everything just lines up better and everything's in a more optimal position, right? You're able to put on muscle, your hunger and cravings are lower, you're going to have more energy to move, right? So it's more indirectly. And then because of that, now say for men, your testosterone's in a good spot because you're sleeping well, right? That's going to obviously put your total daily energy expenditure in a better position. So all these things go hand in hand here with that, right? So these are all things that can impact total daily energy expenditure there with that. There's also some thought that even like Whole foods can sometimes be, you may get a little bit more thermic effective food from whole foods versus more processed foods, right? So that's something to look at there with that. And again, understand that some people are just going to compensate more than others when it comes to the calorie balance and everything like that. What are some things we can do to maintain a higher total daily energy expenditure, right? First thing is going to be, don't always fat loss diet, right? Make sure you're taking some time to eat at your maintenance calories at the least. You're not fat loss. You're not trying to drop weight 24/7. Make sure you're not dropping body weight too quickly within that, at least for too long periods of time. If you have a short 6 to 8 week cut and you can stay consistent with it, you could probably be a little bit more aggressive with that. Make sure you have a plan for afterwards. But if you're always trying to drop weight super quick and you're trying to do that for extended periods of time, you're probably going to lower your total daily energy expenditure. And you're going to have the feeling of, oh, my metabolism is so slow. But really it's what you've been doing to your body there with it. Make sure you're weight training. We want to make sure we're lifting weights from a training perspective and cardio perspective, making sure that you get enough movement in, but again, we can overdo that. So we want to make sure that we're not going too high with that. Sleep, make sure you're getting good sleep. You're prioritizing sleep. Make sure you eat a diet that is mostly whole foods, higher in protein, right? Around 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight. And again, you can have some tasty food in there, some highly processed food. But again, we want to make sure that the base is more whole food. Manage your stress. That's going to be another big one as well too, right? Making sure that you're not in this highly stressed state all of the time can go a long way. But I think the big ones are, make sure you weight train. Try not to always be fat loss dieting. Also, don't have this rapid weight loss for extended periods of time either. And that can go a long way there with that. So hopefully that's helpful. So again, really, yes, there are fast and slow metabolisms, but I think more times than not, people use that as an excuse. And it's really that comes down to the methods and the things that they've done in the past that are the most important there with that. So that's it for this episode. Let me know if you guys have any questions on this. You can send me a DM. If you're someone who maybe you think you have a slower metabolism, you've tried to lose weight in the past and things just kind of stick and then you get in this yo cycle, or again, maybe you want to know what your macros need to be. Maybe you want to know if you're getting too many steps, and that's what my 30-minute free strategy call is for. We talk about where you're at, where you want to go, and how we can bridge that gap. And if you're interested in doing that, the link is in the show notes. But again, if you have any questions on what I talked about today, Instagram's the best place to reach me. I'll talk to you guys soon.